Okay. Right. Well, I believe we are up and running on YouTube. So good morning and welcome to those who are joining us in that format. We're glad to have you with us today as we move through another Sunday as we in our series on in Lent and these Lenten practices that we've been following. As always, if you have not found this list of practices, you can find them. I think we linked them on our website or in the newsletter. So you're welcome to find those there. And if you are joining us on YouTube, feel free to add comments in the chat there, and I'll try to monitor those and bring those into the conversation as we go. Val is not with us this morning. She is on vacation this weekend and taking a little time away before we get to the Easter season. And so it'll just be the crew that's here and those watching on YouTube, some live and some later. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We're going to just keep walking through these practices. It's been an interesting experience, and I think the variety on this list has been really good. It's been good for me, and I've enjoyed the conversation where it seems like some of the practices really land and are meaningful to each of us, and others not so much. And we move on to the next one, and that's okay. And so, and as always, if you did not have a chance to do them or haven't done them in the right order, there's nothing magical about each particular day. So feel free to go back and mix and match and do some again if you want to, whatever works for you. But let's go ahead and just start talking about these and see what this week was like. If I am correct with my markings here, we got to start with day 17. Is that the same place you all are, where we skip the internet for a day and turn off notifications on your phone? Whew. Anybody brave enough to skip the internet for a day and turn off notifications?
Right.
Except for email, which I needed to do a couple things that I was working. Yeah, I didn't Google anything or go on any websites or anything. So it was interesting. I have to admit, maybe because I was working and there were some errands to run there, I didn't really miss it.
I had a terrible time. I thought I had turned off notifications, but I missed a few things like my podcast app or whatever. So notifications were popping up, and of course I had to read them. Or at least skim them. And then I found myself Googling how long the Johnson & Johnson vaccine efficacy timing, because somebody had said it was a month rather than 2 weeks. And then I went, ow, I was not supposed to do that.
So, I think I was successful in I didn't Google that day.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's such a habit, an easy thing to just look something up real quick. Check the weather or whatever it may be. It's just right there at your fingertips. Anybody else have an experience of this or a failure at this?
Yeah, I couldn't do it during the week because I need to read emails from work, but I actually decided to do it on Saturday, yesterday. And it was interesting because I had to plan ahead, because I had to mentally okay, what am I going to do if I have downtime? And so I was like, I'm going to read a book. And so I even had a book prepared, So it was interesting to my mind that I had to plan around for not looking at my phone for an entire day, because I'm so used to looking at my phone.
Turn that light on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have that same, just when there's a moment of boredom, I look at my phone for some reason, for something. And that habit is really, it's a habit. It's sort of an unthinking, unconscious thing. I guess that's why it's good to have days like this when you try to remove that habit, so you notice how much you do use the internet for the day. I did not succeed at this day. And there's always good reasons, right? You can always say, well, I need to check in case there's something from work, or in case there's, I haven't gotten a vaccine yet. Maybe I'll get an email one day saying you can get your vaccine. I wouldn't want to miss that. So I have to check. So I think we always have things that we can look for. Anybody else, or any other reasons why you feel like this is an important Lenten discipline, or what this has to do with our spiritual life to turn off the internet? We've kind of mentioned that, but anything else to add?
I think is because we are so in tune to life around that giving it up for a day is almost harder than giving up chocolate or, some of those type of things. It has just become such a part of our lives. So it's maybe a little bit more of a sacrifice even than those food type things.
That's a great point.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's easy enough to give up something optional that you don't really use that much anyway, or may not have that often, but something that's constantly there gets your attention. It does. Okay, let me just check and see if there's anything on YouTube. We have a good morning from Martha Ballinger. So good morning, Martha. But anyone watching YouTube, feel free to add comments there if you like. And also, I forgot to compliment everyone on making it here the hour early after the time change today. So we may have some people tuning into Bible study, in half an hour or so as they change their clocks. Let's look at the next day. Day 18 was anybody else feel this one when you read it? Invite someone over to your home and cook them a simple weeknight meal. If they're also a believer or comfortable with the practice, pray for one another together at the table.
I didn't even look at that. I just passed right over it because we can't do that now.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't. I don't know if anybody else is, but.
Well, we actually invited somebody that day. The meal didn't take place till Thursday, but we invited Jen Bates over because we know she lives by herself and everything and teaching school and so forth. I have a lot of sympathy for what she's going through. So we invited her to come over.
It was a beautiful day.
And Thursday was going to be and Thursday suited, and it was a beautiful day. So we sat outside and had a quote simple meal of grilled salmon and roasted potatoes and strawberry salad and chocolate cake. That was our simple meal.
Whoa!
I can't get away with simple. I'm sorry, it just didn't work. But it was a neat time. So when I first looked at it, I thought, no, this is because I look ahead sometimes. It was like, no, this is not going to work. And then I said, well, maybe there is a way to make it work. And so it was
Wednesday
nice.
or Thursday would be good. We didn't have choir this week, and she picked Thursday, which was the better day anyway. So.
And since she's not Zooming with the choir, we really hadn't. We used to go over when the pandemic first started, and it was warm enough. We would walk over and visit with her outside since we lived pretty close. We could walk through the park and go see it. And we hadn't been able to do that in a while, so it was nice to kind of catch up.
Yeah, I guess
hear horror stories from school.
Yeah.
I guess with good weather and with vaccines, it's getting to be more possible again to think about meals together and to have an outdoor meal like that. But yeah, anybody else read this and sort of feel a gut punch in hearing these words, or find a way to do it?
It wasn't unusual, but my granddaughter stayed with me. So, that was on Wednesday. She's been perfecting the making of macaroons. And this was our third try, and we did a lot better. It's a real complicated process. One she would take on, and I never would have, but I've learned by being her assistant. And the next day, she spent the night and did some things with me. She was here when we were doing Bible reading Thursday morning. But what I started doing is a Meals on Wheels run. And so she went with me on that. And I think that was really good for her, that exposure, to do that.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. I postponed mine till Thursday, and I have a friend that I talk with that she and I periodically get together to distantly have coffee together. So she came for lunch that day. That nice big salad.
Good. I'm glad you all were finding some ways to find a pandemic version of this practice. And if we weren't able to, it also can just be something to look forward to, or a reminder of what those possibilities were and will be after this is over. Anybody else on this one? All right, day 19, to go from the external focus to the internal focus. Speak words of forgiveness out loud to yourself for that thing you've been holding on to for too long. That's a more personal one, and so you don't have to give us details if you want to, but anybody want to share about that one?
Well, I guess for me, the thing.
You're muted.
Sorry, I think we got muted. Sorry, that was my fault.
I said that the thing for me was what I said to myself was, I forgive you for not being perfect. And the context of that is, you know, growing up, I think my parents valued me more for what it is that I did rather than who it is that I am. And so as a result, I had this thought that I needed to be perfect in everything that I do. And it was an interesting exercise because it made me kind of think through, well, obviously nobody is perfect. And actually the downside of feeling that you're perfect is that you don't reflect on your mistakes, right? Because if you're perfect, then you don't make any mistakes. So that's what I decided to say to myself, which means that, well, I need to examine myself, right? And then if I can examine myself, then I can actually have some sort of growth. So that was what I decided to say to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's really powerful. I mean, those messages that we get, those sort of these things we internalize from our childhood, and they stay with us. They carry with us through our lives. And I feel like sometimes that is, there's often a pattern to the work that we do throughout our lives of reframing how we see ourselves. And I think there's a way in which speaking these words of forgiveness to ourselves can be an ongoing thing, of relearning how we are valued, not just for, and you said that wonderfully, not just for what you can do and the things, but for who you are. So I'm sorry that I muted you just as you were saying something so insightful and profound. I was trying to make your picture bigger. Instead, I turned off the sound, which is the opposite of what I was going for. So there's an example of making mistakes right there in real time.
As a teenager, I was angry with Jesus because he said, according to one of the Gospels, you must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I thought, now he knows I can't be perfect. Why is he requiring this of me? I had to work around that. That was, and I avoid that to this day. I think you're perfect, I guess, being a whole person or a mature person in that sense. But not perfect in any sort of Greek or Roman sense. Anyway.
No. Thank you, Jack. I like that way of thinking of perfect as more in the sense of wholeness and being fully yourself and who you are and who God made you, and to be, to think about that, because that is that verse, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. I'm not sure if we're supposed to laugh when we read that or skip over it or what we're supposed to do, because not sure who that's supposed to be. So yeah, there's a lot of thinking to be done there on what does that perfect mean? It certainly doesn't mean without mistakes. So what could that be?
Yeah, I think for me, well, at least growing up, perfect was just getting straight A's and going to, getting into college, right? It was like academically perfect, which I think is different from what Jesus is saying. I think he probably means more wholesome, like to be a better person. So.
Yeah,
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those external things, the accomplishments and achievements, it's very easy to measure those. And yet, is that the kind of perfection? Is that the kind of wholeness and maturity that God is calling us to? I think that's part of that growing up work, is kind of reframing for ourselves what we're striving after. Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else want to share about this this item here, day 19. Let's see. Let's look at day 20. I particularly enjoyed this day, and I know that the rest of the staff did as well. It said, send an encouraging email to your pastor or priest and tell them how much you appreciate all the extra work they're doing for Lent and Easter prep. Drop off a coffee or a gift card or a note. Actually, I think there's, look at that, there's a gift card right there.
Not on that side.
Well, no, but
Val and I did not edit this list to include day 20, and we did not pick it just because of day 20, but we did laugh about how we were going to enjoy this day when it came. Yeah, so anybody want to share about that? I can share that we appreciated seeing those emails. I checked my email before I read the practice for the day and saw a note. And I said, I bet I know which day we're on for the study. So
You had a big hint, huh?
yes.
Well, and I assume this list was made before the pandemic, but we really appreciate all that's been done in this last year to keep us, going as a family and feeling connected through worship. It's been very meaningful.
I think the whole staff has done a remarkable job toward that.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And I didn't bring this up just to invite lots of praise for the staff. We've not been perfect, but I've been grateful for the way that both as a staff coming together around this challenge, but the congregation too, and for everyone's flexibility in figuring out how we can worship together and how we can do Bible study and how we can have meetings on Zoom and all these things that have been learning experience for all of us, and not exactly perfect, but hanging in there the best we can. I think there's certainly a lot we've learned from this and we're going to take with us on the other side of this, but it's been challenging. It has been.
Again, this was one of those things where you're kind of looking outward, and it was a chance to, you get in the habit sometimes of the ministers, or if you're a teacher, this is what you do. This is your job. And so you're expected to do all these things and do all this planning and get everything done. And we don't take the time to just say, thank you for doing that, because it's kind of expected, if you will. And so, there are times in the past, even before the pandemic, when probably there were some really good things going on, and whether we took the time to say thank you to the ministers and the staff, probably not as much as we ought to.
Yeah, and I think that's a lesson that can apply to everybody around us, right? And like you said, that sometimes we see people as just sort of doing the job they're supposed to do, and they are, and yet we can still thank them for it, whether that job is cooking meals on Wednesday night at church, or whatever it may be, teaching Sunday school, or being a teacher, or working in the grocery store, whatever. All the people around us, just because they're doing it as a job, we can still thank them. And still, it makes a different kind of community when we're all thanking each other for the ways we can help each other.
Well, I think about, we see how impactful it's been for the kinds of thanks and the 7 o'clock bell ringings and so forth for the medical personnel who've been so involved this past year, but they've been involved for years and years. And that's another group that I think about as, we can say, oh yeah, you're a nurse, it's your job to do this, but they go way out of their way to in a lot of ways. And so, I think it helped me to remember let's continue to look for ways to thank people, and it's hard sometimes when we get in looking at something as routine.
Yeah, and thanking people for the way they do their job, not just for checking the boxes, but for doing it with care and concern. And it's worth giving our thanks. Yeah. Well, good. We're going to talk more about thanks and worship today. That's our theme is Psalm 107 is what we're reading, and it's all about Thanksgiving. And so we're going to talk more about that in a little while. But for now, let's move on to Friday, today 21. Light a candle and meditate for 5 minutes, bringing yourself back over and over again to one word that you need to cling to right now. Example, beloved, or sometimes people choose peace or love or whatever type word you like. Anybody have an experience of that this week? Or if you weren't able to do that this week, sometime in the past, trying to sit in silence, centering prayer, another word for that. Anybody want to share about that? This is a practice that comes more naturally to some than others. I think this is a maddening practice for some and a very meaningful practice for others. And for some, it's probably maddening and meaningful. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
So Brian and I have been trying to meditate when we get home after work. And I personally found that, we have a app that kind of has a guide. There's a guy talking and he's guiding you through the process. And then he'll tell you to, like, for example, focus on your breathing, right? And as soon as he says that, my mind immediately starts to think about everything else. And then it can't focus. And then as soon as he's like, okay, and now, let your mind wander. And then my mind's like, wait, let's focus on my breathing. So it seems to do the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, I definitely find it frustrating, but I think it's supposed to be a really good thing. So.
Elizabeth, do you find that over the course of that meditation, does it change do you feel different as you're leaving the meditation than when you came in?
I think at the very end, because you close your eyes, and I think the process of closing your eyes for a few minutes and then opening your eyes almost feels like, okay, you're waking up and it helps you. I think the physical aspect of that is really useful for me. Yeah, but trying to focus on my breathing, for example, is so hard.
Anybody else have a similar experience? Yeah, whenever I try to do centering prayer like this, whether it's for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or 1 minute, it doesn't really matter. My brain, I think I realize how all over the place my brain is as soon as I'm trying to be still and not think about a thing. Then all these sometimes good ideas and sometimes just ideas just start zooming around, and I don't know. It eventually it seems like they do slow down a little bit, and when I go back to life after it, I feel a little more calm. But other times it just feels chaotic and feels like, perhaps if nothing else, it reminds me that I am not able to control my own brain. I'm not able to control my and I guess that's an important lesson to see too, that we can't, we're not fully in control. We can't even tame ourselves. I've heard people talking about this. Oh, were you starting to say? So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I didn't find focusing on the candle to work for me. That to me was distracting. Closing my eyes, it works a lot better for me. I'm not sure why, but and I also have a constant music track running in my brain. At night, I even wake up in the middle of the night or whatever, but it's been wordless prayer, which is a really nice song to have when you're meditating, but it was still but that's going on in my head, I'm trying to block it out. It wasn't successful, but 5 minutes went by quickly. I've done it for 20 before or longer, and that's definitely harder, but I think more satisfying at the end. So when you can carve out 10 to 20.
Yeah. I think this isn't for everyone necessarily, but it can be a meaningful thing to try. And I've heard people talking about this, that not to think of it as failure when your mind is wandering, because it's easy to sort of beat yourself up the whole time of, why am I thinking about this now? But to see it each time as, well, turning back to God again and turning back to that word, beloved or peace or God, whatever that word is, every time is a chance to practice turning back to God and returning to the center. So that kind of imagery, and that in some ways that is a practice that you need in all of your life, is to keep coming back, to keep returning to God at the center of your life. And that meditation time can just be a practice, an opportunity to see how many times you start going over here and can come back, and start going over here and come back. And in some ways that aspect of centering can be meaningful. Anything else on that one? All right, day 22 is yesterday. Plant a tree or a flower. Take a moment to be grateful for this world. Place your hands in the dirt and rejoice. All right. Anybody have an experience of that, whether yesterday or sometime this week?
I did plant 2 flowers this week, 2 shamrocks, but
All right.
I did kind of think about the beauty of flowers when I was doing it.
Yeah.
Most of this pretty week we've had, I've been getting gardens ready to plant flowers. So I have had my hands in the dirt a lot, but haven't planted anything yet. But get excited about the possibilities.
Yeah.
What will be there.
Yeah, we actually yesterday on day 22, we planted, let's see, a magnolia tree, 2 river birches, and a gum tree. So we went to the nursery and we got a bunch of trees, and it was hard. It was hard work. I was pretty tired at the end. Brian did most of it, but yeah, but it was very satisfying to like eventually see the hole. He dug the hole with his tractor, and it had like a bucket in the front, and it was a giant hole. And then we had to we couldn't really move the magnolia tree because it was so heavy, but we kind of rolled it and then pushed it in with the tractor, and then it fell in. And it was oh, okay, there it goes. And we went to check on it this morning, and they're all standing up so far. So hopefully it will survive. But yeah, it was really nice.
Standing up is a good start for a tree, so that's good.
All right.
Yeah.
Debbie had me go outside and with a special water mixer and water some plants that are in Miracle Grow in our where our flowers are alongside our sidewalk. And I picked up a little handful of dirt and threw it back down, and thank that I don't have to garden, because I hate gardening. You know. But she plants the flowers, but she couldn't get out there to water.
Obviously.
So I went and did it, but I
mean, the daffodils and the hyacinths are up, and I thought, oh, good, let's give them some fertilizer, and maybe they'll bloom better.
If anybody sees our yard and our flower garden, they would understand why our yard looks the way it is. Which is because I learned to cut the grass when I was about 8 years old, and I hated my father every single time I had to go out and cut it. So I hate being out in the yard doing yard work. I hate it to this day.
That's why we have
I don't find anything enjoyable about it at all.
Well, I was about to say how this practice is listed because there's something restorative about putting your hand in the soil, and how that is like the way God nurtures us. And maybe that can be true. And also, this one is not for everyone. So no, I think just as centering prayer is not an effective practice for everyone, perhaps gardening is not either. But hopefully somewhere in this list we find something that does fill us up and teach us something. So
I do want to share a story in general. We have a group of couples that we do a monthly meeting with Marriage Encounter, and we were the presenters Friday night when we had our Zoom meeting, and we actually did it on Lenten practices, and we each took a couple of the ones that we had done and talked about them. And it came to my mind that some of them are adding things, and some of them are subtracting things. And so I called it Lenten math, addition/subtraction. And it was interesting that the subtraction for here, the mathematician in my brain just took over. A lot of the subtracting ones are subtracting something that's negative. Well, if any mathematician knows, if you subtract a negative, it's really adding. So it turns out to be addition in both directions. But I've found each practice, because this is the point that we made to them, was because it was different and not just one thing, like give up chocolate, which you can easily forget about. This has kind of brought my mind to what Lent should be about in a different way each and every day. And so we actually then emailed them the ones for this coming week to see if they'll participate as well. So we may have some other people participating along with us in Sarah Bessie's list.
That's great. I really like that. That's great. The Lenten math. Well, we are at the end of our half hour, and we've been closing with reading Psalm 90. So I'm going to pull that back up again. We've been just pulling different translations out just so we keep having this in the back of our mind somewhere. And perhaps at the end of our session, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and pull that up here. Hope you all can see that. It's Psalm 90. This one is, what translation? The Good News translation. So something a little bit different this week. There's 17 verses. So maybe if someone would like to read verses 1 through 8, and then at that point you can stop and someone else can jump in and read the rest of it. So I won't micromanage it, but whenever you would like, unmute yourself and read the beginning for us.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Oh Lord, you have always been our home. Before you created the hills or brought the world into being, you were eternally God and will be God forever. You tell us to return to what we were. You change us back to dust. 1,000 years to you are like one day. They are like yesterday, already gone, like a short hour in the night. You carry us away like a flood. We last no longer than a dream. We are like weeds that sprout in the morning, that grow and burst into bloom, then dry up and die in the evening. We are destroyed by your anger. We're terrified by your fury. You place our sins before you, our secret sins where you can see them.
I'll read. Our life is cut short by your anger. It fades away like a whisper. 70 years is all we have, 80 years if we are strong. Yet all they bring us is trouble and sorrow. Life is soon over and we are gone. Who has felt the full power of your anger? Who knows what fear your fury can bring? Teach us how short our life is so that we may become wise. How much longer will your anger last? Have pity, O Lord, on your servants. Fill us each morning with your constant love so that we may sing and be glad all our life. Give us now as much happiness as the sadness you gave us during all our years of misery. Let us, your servants, see your mighty deeds. Let our descendants see your glorious might. Lord our God, may your blessings be with us. Give us success in all we do.
Thank you. We'll keep returning to that as we go through Lent. There's so much in that psalm and so many pulls us in a lot of different directions, I think, and I think it's a helpful grounding place for this journey that we're on. So we'll keep doing that.
119, I think.
But for now, we are going to wrap up for today. We'll continue moving through these practices and discuss again next week. Val will be back with us, and perhaps some of the late sleepers will join us as well. As always, if you're watching on YouTube and would like to join us on Zoom, please do. We'd love to see your faces. But otherwise, thanks for being here, and we will see you in a little while as we continue and move into worship at 11. And I hope you all have a very good week. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.